This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're here with Dalila, and her project is Mya Project, is a electro musical project that she's doing. And I want to welcome you to the Fam Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing tonight?
Hello, everybody. I'm doing great.
Well,
Thank you for having me.
we love to have musicians on. It's kind of our first love. I kind of explained to you we started the podcast back in 2016, always talking to emerging artists and musicians. So we love it when we get to go back to our roots. And yeah, we're gonna dive deep into everything musical because that's in my wheelhouse as well. But like we always ask everybody before we get into the depth of the podcast, what motivates you and why do you do what you do?
Well, it wasn't too much of a choice being a musician. My mother discovered that I had this talent. I had this musical ear when I was 2 years of age. I played a piano by ear, just playing commercials. I would listen to, the music that was coming from the TV, and she
Mhm.
realized, oh, she has a gift. So I started. I rolled the music conservatory at the age of 3, pretty much as a kindergarten school. So more than a decision was kind of a path that I had to follow, because it's, everybody's got that thing where you're good at something, you have something that you shine on, and that was my thing. So music has always been something that I pursued since I was a toddler. um,
That's
of
that's really cool because what I've always found with the people I talk to is like their creative tendencies tend to come from early childhood. That a
mhm.
lot of people like either they really dived into it or like they come back to it, but they always talk about how they were really kind of brought into that path. And
True.
um, and it's interesting also because we were talking about how like you like band like Depeche Mode, and you're a
Hmm.
classically trained person. Remember that story like Tori Amos that she was classically trained, and then suddenly she decided
Yes.
like no, she wasn't gonna, she couldn't,
Yeah,
she wasn't gonna deal with it. She's like she had to do something different.
she was kicked out of Juilliard,
Yeah,
and that
she
was
wasn't following the program.
yes. Well, I totally agree. I mean, it came for me when I was, more of a teenager, grown up, where studying classical music is really, really important. It really gave me the probably the
Foundation.
strongest foundations. Yes, but there's always a limit. As a classical musician, you will always play music written by others. For as
Mm,
beautiful as it is, you're not really left a lot of space for creativity. So, as a music composer, the conservatory gave me a little too many limits. So I had the same transition when I completed my studies at the conservatory. I decided, okay, I don't want to become too much of a performer. I want to be a music producer, a songwriter. So
mm.
I kind of my major was the conservatory violin, so I'm a professional violinist. I can play Mozart and Bach, but I wanted more. So the best way for me to understand how to produce music, not only as a songwriter, but as a music producer slash sound engineer, was attending a school of sound engineering. Back then, the best school was the S.A.E. in England. So
Mhm.
at the age of 19, I moved to England to pursue my career as a sound engineer slash music producer. That was the best experience of my life, the funnest. Really learned a lot. I have a story for your listeners. I had the amazing moment when I attended a seminar by Alan Parson,
Oh
which
wow, Alan
for the
Parsons is
people
awesome.
that, yeah, people who don't know who Alan Parson is, Google it, check it out. He's the sound engineer that was behind Dark Side of the Moon, beside being a music producer himself, a very successful one,
Yeah,
which I love. Very humble person, super professional. He gave me a lot of tips on how to record music. And of course, yeah, for me, was probably the highest moment of my college career. Um,
well
then
that's just
after this,
amazing.
Yes, yes. And then he was actually the one who inspired me to then become a physicist, because I realized that the art of sound is also science of sound,
Hmm.
and there is a lot of science behind sound techniques and sound in general. So I decided to deepen my knowledge, becoming a physicist with an emphasis in acoustic engineering. So I became a specialized in acoustic. And that was another very important moment, because my whole music, it's kind of centered to the idea of human beings being part of a universe. It's just as a small part of the
Hmm.
universe. So you'll find in my lyrics there's a lot of this vibe of, being, just a part of
Part
a
of the whole. Part
bigger.
of the whole.
Yes.
Yeah. Like this is like this whole synchronicity with the well, I would always end up Pete Townsend in this idea of like getting in tune with this universal key, which was a part of
Yes.
like Lifehouse. This idea that like you hit this universal note and all the hippies are gonna like understand. And you're gonna suddenly hit
Hmm.
this key that it's and it's kind of in music. Like if you're playing a live show and you actually hit that the right frequency and you're getting in tune with the audience, you kind of see that real time. You can
Oh,
see that
yes.
you hit this frequency, and you can do it with your voice if you're a speaker, when you're a singer or you're a musician, you can see that you can with sound, and that's why, I got really into synthesizers,
Hmm.
because I like the idea of the sound design. The sound design ends up
Yes.
being I spend hours on it before I even write the song.
Yes, I I hear you. That's same. We can spend hours just to find the perfect sound. And actually, that's something that I learned as a music producer, to kind of optimize my time, because I can get lost pretty easily into
Yeah.
the choice of the perfect sound, forgetting what the songwriting part. So I
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
focus some time of just putting down the idea, and then a trick to do that easily is to kind of produce my demos with softwares like a Reason or a digital synthesizer, inbuilt in my computer, and then moving everything to the big toys like the Moog, just everything. I can rewrite the sound of my arrangement, but first thing first is putting down the idea, because by the time we find the perfect sound, the idea might be gone, and
Yeah, yeah.
that, that's a
That's a
precious
good
thing that.
yeah, I've always been
Yes.
into this idea of, stream of consciousness kinda in the moment. So I have a
Mm-hmm.
lot of just like multi-track recorders, and I might just jump on one of my pianos or my Juno or my Moog, and just put the recorder down, and
Mm-hmm.
just kind of have a mic like this, and just kind of rattle off something for like an hour, and then I go back
Yes.
and listen to it, and then I said, well, that's kind of like I found a nugget in here at like 27 minutes, and 15 seconds. Here's something I want to work on. Then I go and say, well, now I'm going to optimize what that Moog sound could be, fool around with the
True.
oscillators, fool around with the filters, run it through all the envelope generators, and just do whatever I can and say, well, what happens if I do it like this? What happens if I do it like that? And it's like, is it better than the original? But I always keep that original, because it could be that the
Mm-hmm.
original take is actually better than all the rest of them.
Yeah, many times that's the case. Yes. I remember there was an interesting story about Alanis Morissette. She recorded one of the songs, the first single from the first album. I was Jagged Little Pill.
Jagged Little Pill, yeah,
Um,
yeah, that's a great album.
yeah. Yes, and I heard the story of recording. She recorded the first vocal track, and she sang from her heart. There was something about that take
It was
that
really good.
was magic. However, there was a problem with the grounding of the microphone, so there was a background noise, something a little annoying. Not really, just there in the background. So they had to retake, redo the take, and they did it probably 20 times just to find out that the first take was the best. So they
Yeah,
decided to keep
just
it
leave it
with the
with the
background
noise.
noise. Yeah,
Yeah,
doesn't matter. It was
that's like an
beautiful.
old yeah, that's an
Yeah.
older kind of methodology. I don't know if as many people today go for that because of all the
Mm-hmm.
DAWs and all the perfection kind of mindset. But I remember, like, if you think about the Kinks, She Really Got Me. Like, they
Mm-hmm.
had a broken amplifier that got that sound,
Mm.
and then they tried to use an amplifier that wasn't broken, and it's like, well, it doesn't sound like the broken one. So there's a
Yes.
lot of choices back in the 70s and the 80s, when people were kind of doing this, from Zappa to Funkadelic, people would, Neil Young and Crazy Horse, they would just like, why not? Why not try that? But let's put it all
Yeah.
down and see what works. And
Yes.
not in really like the feel of it. Like Neil Young is famous, like he can do really good pitch, but sometimes he does
Mm-hmm.
like a scratchy kind of off key, but it actually
Mm-hmm.
serves the song because it's so emotional what he's saying that you don't want it to be perfect, even though he could sing like Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. But that song
Yes.
doesn't serve that you do it that way.
Absolutely. I agree. And we're losing that spontaneous vibe. We're kind of in favor of something too perfect, because music production nowadays is a it's business. It's a
Mhm.
product to be, it has to be sold. It's nothing different. Art has become mostly profit. So the pursuit of a perfection, I think, is killing authenticity, is killing art, is killing
It kills
uh,
innovation.
yes,
Because
yes.
perfection is like the enemy of innovation. There's a lot of poets, a lot of creative people will go down that road. Because, like, if you think about the things like Hendrix when he did what he was doing, right? He first came in the studios and he was doing the feedback and doing the things he was doing there. They say, well,
Mm-hmm.
that's too loud. That's too rambunctious. You're too. And then he had to fight with the recording engineers to keep it. But he had a vision.
Mm-hmm.
He said it needs to stay
Yes.
this way. And then eventually he got more in control and dealt with producers that listened to him and said, no, this guy has something and it doesn't sound
Yeah.
like anybody else. So we're going to
Yes.
have to go with it.
Yes. And I agree. The choice of the right sound engineer and producer, it's probably 50% of an album, of any production, because the feeling, the vibes you have in studio with the producer is part of the winning product. I've heard many stories, and I have clients because I work as a sound engineer, not only from my music project, for customers. And the first thing is to engage with my clients at a spiritual level. If we
Mm,
connect, the product will
vibe.
be much better. Yeah. It's about it. We're sound engineers, also a little bit of a psychologist. Many times we need to understand what the client, the musician, is going through, what they want, what's their fears, their insecurities. So I do play a little bit also of a psychologist sometimes, particularly with a new artist that don't know how to approach the recording session, or are scared of the performance. There is this fear of perfection that is pervaded. I'm noticing this very much more and more with new artists. This the fear of having to be perfect. I want to sound like
Yeah.
that. I want to look like that. And you
So,
know uh, the final product is not, it takes a lot of, you know what I'm talking about. Between the recording and the final product, there is a lot of work to be done, and many times artists don't understand that it takes patience to
yeah.
achieve something
With the
beautiful.
vulnerability is like the secret sauce. And what I
Hmm.
always liked about like the period between like progressive rock and like punk rock is the punk
Hmm.
rock aesthetic, which also allowed post punk to happen, where
Yes.
you had like a Joe Strummer doesn't have the
Hmm.
best tone compared to like, yes, singing like, he's not singing like Robert Plant, but that's not the point. Like, you don't need to sing like Robert Plant on a Clash song, right?
Yes,
Johnny
exactly.
Rotten, Johnny Lydon is like, there's a reason why there's that punk aesthetic, or Paul Westerberg from The Replacements, or Bob Mould from Who's to Do. What I loved about the punk aesthetic is it allowed some freedom
Hmm.
where people didn't go for the perfection. Even like early
True.
REM has got that kind of mindset. Is like you could just be out there and trying something where Michael Stipe, when I didn't understand his vocals, I
Hmm.
actually liked the band a lot more when it
Yeah,
was like very raw and atmospheric, and it's like this is different. I haven't heard anybody sing like this. All these
that's
weird
true.
allegory and strangeness. And it's like that's what I always liked. Not everybody probably likes the thing that's on the cutting edge, the bleeding edge. They want the popular thing. So I
Yes.
understand like that tendency to want to go for popular things, but like you don't get innovation if you're not willing to take risk and be vulnerable and kind of show your secret sauce is the fact that you're not like anybody else. And if we
Yes.
can get
Yes.
the core of who you are and you can stop being scared about revealing who you are, if you can put that on tape or put it down and we can
Yeah.
refine it in a way that you can as an engineer, you can make that is the best. It's like I can take your demo and make you the best you, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. I have an interesting story for you guys, for your listeners, because once before becoming a trained sound engineer, I decided to record with an engineer in England, and after recording a demo, he tells me, "Well, your voice doesn't sound like any singer I know. You should have maybe a professional singer singing your songs." And that that was a very peculiar kind of advice, because the fact itself, they said you do not sound like any other singer I know. It was an unconscious flattering, if you will, compliment, because for me was probably the best compliment I've ever received. It was a
That's
kind
your
of a,
little niche. That's your secret sauce.
yeah, yeah, because I've lived for the day where somebody tells me, "Well, your product is unique, your voice is unique, or whatever. Whether you like it or not, if you haven't heard it before, it means it's original." So
Yeah, you think
I
about a
think
guy
that,
like David Byrne and Talking Heads. Like even to this day,
yeah,
nobody sounds like that. Nobody looks like that. It's like a post punk
yes,
kind of thing, and is in the same club CBGBs where you had the Ramones and Patti Smith and Blondie. So in that club,
yes,
you had those bands, and look at the
mm-hmm,
diversity of those bands. The Ramones
yes,
doesn't sound like Blondie, doesn't sound like Patti Smith, doesn't sound like Talking Heads. But now
yeah,
today, everybody's expected to be in the same zone. Like you couldn't have it, Talking Heads and then have Blondie on the same stage unless you're doing
yeah,
some big outdoor festival. It's like so the problem, is the people seem to have forgotten. Like you got these really interesting bands because people took risks.
yes. Well, you know, I in this we need to kind of blame a little bit major music labels. I mean, I don't want to
For
take the
sake.
part of the artist, or but it's also true that unfortunately music labels have made creativity very limited for artists, because major music labels expect a package that is a standard package, and if you do not fall into that category in the above of what they want, it's really hard to make it mainstream. Um, I I've experienced that myself. That's why I'm an independent artist now, even though I was with an independent label before. But even then, there were sort of a standards that had to be followed, including the name of my album, or the name of my songs, or the way I
Yeah,
appeared.
cover.
And unfortunately, we live in a historical moment where it's a kind of a split between the people that want to be original, and the people that just want to make money with music, which is fine. I don't criticize the people that are there for the business, for the industry, for the money. It's just a choice. If you're there to make it as a big mainstream artist, then you're gonna have to comply with certain
Right.
rules and standards. If instead your choice is to be original and be one of those artists that maybe never gonna make a dime out of their music,
Yeah,
but
I
then
don't
you can
even
be
know
original.
if a guy like Prince would have been able to even get signed the way things are today because like when he got signed, um,
Yeah.
they wanted the Earth, Wind and Fire, Maurice White
Yes.
to produce it, and he said no. And they let him, a 17-year-old, produce his first album. I doubt that would
Mm.
happen if somebody
Yes.
said we have Maurice White, and then imagine if Prince had caved to that and his first album had been produced, it would have been like in the same vein as Earth, Wind and Fire, which is not bad, but it would
Mm-hmm.
have been in that zone. We already have that zone. It's already out there. Instead, we got the
Yes.
Minneapolis sound, and we got one of probably the most experimental, popular musicians to ever exist because he was willing to kind of say, "No, I'm not going to have the bass line on this song. No, I'm going to leave it sounding like a demo. that he was willing because he knew
True.
what he wanted, and he happened to have success. It's like the rare
Yes,
situation where you actually have somebody that's very innovative that actually can pull numbers.
that's true. That's true. And also, let's not forget that unfortunately, we are slaves now of this, internet, AI, social media, uh,
Oh yeah,
politics, to where, unfortunately, people that don't have numbers don't get exposure. And people that don't have exposure don't get numbers. Just a
yeah.
quick
It's kind of like the new
example.
payola. It's like the new payola,
Yes,
right?
yeah, I mean, it's a real struggle, and I am one of the luckiest, because I've been in the music industry for so long. First, as a classical musician, performing as a violinist, then as a sound engineer, working for big names. I work as a sound engineer at Abbey Road. About 10 years
Mhm.
ago. So, kind of, I matured my connection in the music industry to where my main income, I'm honest, I mean, with my music is a music placements through libraries and documentaries and movie scores. But I acknowledge that it's very, very hard for an artist to grow in the age of the internet, because unless you already have a number of followers or streaming or not, you won't gain that visibility, because it's built by an algorithm. So
Yeah,
nowadays, what we would used to call a talent scout, the person that will go and discover new talent. Now it's an algorithm, it's an
yeah. Instead
AI
of going to
generated.
Detroit and going to a club
Yeah,
in Detroit, or going to like Philly, or going,
yeah,
to Athens, or going to Nashville, and like looking sitting there. Even like the story
yeah.
with Buffalo Springfield, with like the producers actually go. I mean, the A&R guys went and sat and listened to the band, and they came to
Yes.
see them. And it's like if you're
Yeah.
not doing that kind of work, and also it's like a thing Frank Zappa said. Is like he said, I might be critical of the old school music managers, but he said the one thing that they did, he has a quote where it's like the one thing they did that maybe is not being done today. It's like I might not understand it, so I'm gonna just like throw it at the wall. Maybe somebody will understand it. Where we have people
Yes.
now that think they understand it to the nth degree and
Yes.
actually are filtering out like everything.
Yes. And I invited your listeners to check all the Frank Zappa's interviews online on YouTube, all of them, because that man was not only always dropped, he always had so much wisdom and knowledge, one of
Yeah,
the smartest people that ever existed. And also from a political perspective, I saw him talking, uh, speaking out the truth, his
yeah.
mind. He was a very honest and extremely smart artist.
Well, I love the
So
fact that he was willing to speak his mind, and then he's such a brilliant
yeah,
musician. If you look at what he did with the
yes,
others and the work he did, it's a brilliant. I mean, it's like crossing classical and jazz,
oh
fusion and
yes,
rock, and it's like everywhere. It's kind of like where I like
yes,
to be as a musician. It's like if you can be in that kind of zone, that's where you want to be. That's where at least I want to be as a
yes,
musician. Is like to kind of be able to be in that kind of frame.
yes,
You look at it that's the way I want to write. I want to write where
hmm,
things are like I don't have limitations. I can go and stretch out, and if like I can go into the deep end and like tiptoe into it, or maybe dive into it and come back. But
yes.
yeah, I think people are so scared. There's so much safety. It's like I thought music people did it because they kind of want rebellion. You know, it's kind of
Yes.
like a James Dean character. Like, but it's like it doesn't seem to be as rebellious as the punk aesthetic age. It's like,
Um, I think s- people have realized that music is more powerful than politics, and it's more powerful than many politicians, many people, and famous people, because musicians talk to a large crowd of people that love art. So
Mhm.
I think art in general, and particularly music, has been weaponized in the past few decades to become a message, like a promotion of messages that have nothing to do with with music itself. For example, the thing of associating music to politics or an agenda or certain views, it's something extremely disturbing. Art should be something untouchable, something that that transcend anything material, that transcend the politics or point of views or people's opinions, and instead has been weaponized to where we have to witness nowadays musicians getting to the place of a politician, telling people what to think, what to say, what to do, what to not say or not to think. And I
Mm.
think it's wrong. I think it's very, very wrong, because then you have what it's the dark side of censorship, to where if what you say is wrong and it doesn't comply with whatever the majority of the agenda, it's censored, or
Oh
even
yeah,
worse,
you get blacklist.
deleted, or yes,
Yeah, you get the blacklist kind of scenario that we run into, where you're
yes,
not able to have like the punk aesthetic idea of you get the freedom to be out there and have it's not perfect, but it's like I have an authenticity, right, of what
yes,
I believe in what I'm doing. Whether
yes,
you're like David Byrne out there believing what he's doing, or like when David Bowie was Ziggy and he just went out there and was like, I'm
yes,
going to play this character because I believe in this. Like I believe in presenting this character because I'm going to do theater. His whole thing is like he wanted
yes,
to present like theater. And then people want to like, well, if you want to attach politics to it, you could say, well, I don't like where he's coming from. But it's like, what does
yes,
that got to do with it? It's like, if you don't like it, don't watch it, right? Like, if
exactly,
you don't listen to it, but it's like, you don't go and say he should be banned from the radio. You should go
yeah,
take albums like the Beatles and burn them. And John
yeah,
Lennon said something you didn't like. you
yeah.
know, you know, it's like you say you got to burn all the Beatle albums because he said something you didn't like.
Well, back in Europe in the Middle Ages, that's what they will do. They will burn books and, and burning witches or people, women of knowledge. So it
Yeah,
seems to me that we're kind of living a little bit of a deja vu of
yeah.
what it used to be, in the past back in Europe. And it's,
People don't learn. I mean, I think
yeah,
history has failed. Like, I don't know if people, people are so transactional, and people are so like into like the consumerism, and so
true.
they can like pin things down. It's like so you tie a song to a pharmaceutical product, and then to me
Yes.
it's like it wrecks that song. It's like now I'm hearing it all day being used for some stomach medicine. And it's like that's not what the
Yes.
songwriter really wanted that song to be, but now you've turned it into some jingle. Instead of actually writing a
Yes.
jingle that's unique for that thing, you take an
Hmm.
existing song because you want to, you know, build off the popularity of that song and then kind of take it over. And I'm like,
Yes.
it's like as an artist, it's like I understand people have to make money, but it's not my
Yeah.
cup of tea.
Well, once again, it's a choice. It's a compromise. I believe very much in choice. And as an artist, I realize I understand. I am myself somebody that I work in research on the side, so I'm lucky enough to have a multiple income. I do not
Incomes, yeah.
rely on
So
a
you don't have
music,
to, yeah,
of
you
course.
don't have to.
But
Oh,
I
yeah,
also
you don't have to
understand
be
that
starving
the
for
people that devote the yeah, and it's really, really unfair, because I see it very much with when in my one of my side project, I work as a violinist for I'm a concert violinist, and it's when I am playing the part, I'm working as a musician, is when I get disrespected the most,
when you're
in the
playing
sense
that.
that
Yeah.
yes, because as a musician, you're like, people picture a musician like, your uncle or your niece playing the banjo, for the family party. So there is a sort of a attitude toward a musician that is like, well, you're not really working, you're not really
Yeah.
doing so, you're having
Not a real
fun.
job. It's not a
Uh,
real job.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So, um, I like to, remind people that physically, I've had a challenge with playing the violin for so long, for over 25 years, because it paid a toll on my shoulders and neck, to where I have to
Hmm.
see
You get
a
injuries or
chiropractor.
yeah.
Yes, and then the playing the so I do live in constant pain from having played the violin for so long. So people don't understand that um, there is a sacrifice being a musician, being a music producer or violinist, whatever it is.
Well,
It
it's the
takes
same thing
sacrifices,
a
not only
dancer or an athlete. Like if you're an athlete, you get all these injuries and they builds up over
absolutely,
time, and then you're
yeah,
totally like you're not going to be in your prime anymore, and you can't even play. And the same things,
exactly,
dancers get all these dancer injuries, and eventually
yes,
they're not going to be able to do it. And so musicians, you get carpal tunnel, you get all kinds of issues with your back or your knees, and
yeah,
because like the way
uh,
you have to hold your instrument, or like if you're playing, keyboards, you can get carpal tunnel if you like overdo it and you don't learn how to exercise your fingers and kind of give yourself because that's
totally,
the problem with the musicians. We kind of get into the practice. We can get a too extreme with our practice. We don't listen to our body, and
that's
we
true.
push through things we probably shouldn't have done
Well,
for the song or for the performance. It's like maybe I shouldn't have done that.
yes, I have an interesting story. This was me playing live with the Mya Project. This was in northern Italy. There was a problem with the ground on the stage, the electrical panel. It rained the
Mhm.
night before, so bottom
Oh,
line, I got electrocuted on stage
oh wow.
by catching an amplifier. Yes, and for about 5 seconds, I've had an adrenaline rush going through my body. So see the risk and the challenge of there's so many things that people don't take into account. I don't know
Yeah,
of many people that can say I've been electrocuted in my life and I survived.
yeah, it's a hard thing because like some people don't actually survive that. And I've read about some bands that actually had real big issues with that. But
Yes.
like when we get more into like the producing side of it, in terms of like the type of like the gear and stuff that you use and the techniques that you use, are there any like things that you lessons learned over time in terms of like how you like I think you mentioned earlier like your process of kind of sketching something out. Do you want to go into
Yeah.
more details about your overall
Sure,
process? Because I know
absolutely,
that
I'd
like
love
the
to.
finishing expert part of it, like you put down a song, but then once you get into engineering, you got all these different
Mhm.
flavors that you can actually really radically change the song.
Yes, absolutely. So let me tell you a little bit more about my uh, production process. I'm Pro Tools lover. So I've been using Pro Tools as a recording software for over 15 years. And I love the interface. I love the fact that it's the most popular software used in recording studios. So that gives me a lot of advantage when I have to transfer files or work remotely with our
With somebody
engineers,
else,
even
yeah.
abroad. Yeah, because I'm based now in LA, but I do a lot of work with engineers in England. Um, my choice of microphones, as you can see, I have a beautiful U87 here,
Mm.
Neumann. I also have a Brauner microphone. I believe that German and Austrian microphones are some of the best. Well, German technology definitely plays a role. I do have Adam speakers, German speakers. Um, Mac Pro as a computer reliable. I know that people, there's a little bit of a battle between either Microsoft or Macintosh. I do use Macintosh because the interface is more compatible with all the software I use. I do have an analog digital converter and an audio sound card. It's Universal Audio Apollo.
Mhm.
Um, I do use Apollo and Universal Audio plugins. They're not cheap; they're expensive, but those are the best digital options for that kind of sound pretty much like the analog version. So, for
Like
example,
Neve,
I do
Stuff. They're pretty close
yes,
to like the Neve, right?
Yes, I have to say I experienced, the comparison. I did it in my recording studio, trying the digital version of the SSL compressor and the analog, and I have to say the difference was almost unperceivable. So
Negligible. Yeah.
the good thing that Universal Audio does, if you're a shopaholic like me, because you can spend up to $300 for just one plugin, but once you subscribe to Universal Audio, they will send you monthly coupons and packages to where you can
Oh,
buy
so you
three,
can check
four
things out.
plugins for $500, but best money ever spent. Also, because the Universal Audio comes with a DSP, so it's an outboard platform to where all the plugins are stored in the DSP. That way, you're not using your
Your CPU.
computer's
Yeah.
CPU exactly.
So
So
you don't get
there is
lag. You don't get the lag that you would get like if you're trying to
exactly,
run Pro Tools and that at the same time, and then you're
exactly,
lagging all over the
yeah,
place.
yeah,
Where
and
some
also
people might,
higher quality. Yeah,
yeah, that's why
it's a
with some people, yeah, might want the physical. With some people, like they're into the physical stuff because they like all the dials and the physical things in front
yes.
of them,
I
kind of like a
do. I do
mode.
have a channel strip, an SSL channel strip, which I use for my voice, paired with the U87, because I found this perfect setup for
But
my
yeah,
kind of my tone, which U87 with the compressor SSL. That said, I do have, as you can see here, kind of a house, a small recording studio to where I do my pre-production.
mhm.
Interesting fact: this is a boat. I live and
You're in
I
a
have a
boat.
recording studio. Yes,
Well,
I
that's
am on a
cool.
boat. I live on water. Been living on water for 10 years, and I got
Does
inspired
that
by
have any
David.
challenges when you're recording being on the water, or does it not give you a
Um,
challenge?
no, not really. Actually, there's a point of advantage. I do not have neighbors.
Oh, so
The
you
only
don't bother
background
people.
noise that man might have,
Yeah, they
yeah.
don't bother
So
you. If you don't bother
I did,
them, they don't
yeah,
bother.
yeah. It goes both ways. Yeah, exactly. You got it right. But I did some soundproofing here, in this particular room of the boat to make it sure that the sound is contained and it's still I don't have any too much noise coming from outside. But particularly for a person like me that loves recording, usually later in the day, afternoon, night, a
Mhm.
boat, the marina is the most peaceful place
Well,
ever.
that's good. It's a good vibe. It's a good vibe,
Oh
you know?
yes, the only interruption I might have is sometimes once in a while you have a sea lion that comes, by the boat. So
Make it
I have a
music.
broom
Yeah,
if I'm
you're
recording it to where
recording.
I make some noise on the dock and the sea lion understand and just swims away from the boat. So, it's a perfect environment also because um, as you probably know, as a music producer, sometimes you can spend hours in a recording studio and producing something, editing. And the fact that I have a beautiful door here leading me to the water and the beautiful
You can get
view,
out.
it just
Yeah.
yes, that's
Yeah.
important to have a break, to just sometimes. That's one thing I learned uh, with my experience being a sound engineer. Very, very important. Take sufficient breaks
Yeah.
for
Walk
your
away and
ears,
come
for your
back.
brain. Yes, clear
Yeah.
up your mind, because many, many times it happened to me, and I know that happens to or recording artists. You're focusing on the perfect sound, the perfect
Yeah.
take, and you're working and doing and doing and editing and editing. Then you take a break and come back, and it's something else. As your brain refreshes and clears up, you hear things from a brand new perspective. And
Yeah.
it
You just,
feels like you lost all the time and trying to do something where when your brain is clean and fresh, it's everything, it's
yeah.
much easier and it will come easier. So take breaks. Don't
With
be afraid of
yeah, they're diminishing returns if you stay on something too much. Like I find that sometimes you got to walk away, and then come
yeah.
back to it because then you, like you said, you have a fresh point of view. I mean, sometimes I go back to like my catalog of stuff. Like I was working on something 6 months ago, 2 months ago,
Hmm.
and maybe it didn't work. Then I pull it up and it's like, well, it works now. Now I got the idea for this. So I like to
Hmm.
keep like a big archive of stuff. And even if it wasn't working, somehow it's like at this moment I can make it work. And so like then
Exactly.
you realize like you shouldn't throw your stuff away. You should record as much as you can.
Yes, yes, yeah. Everything is it's a new idea, and um, another piece of advice is to um, make sure the microphone, the pre-recording part of the production is as important as the mixing. A lot of
Mm.
people spend too little time setting up the right microphone, the right position, or the right setup, then having to spend all the time into manipulating the sound in
To fix it
post-production,
because they got to fix
equalizing,
something they had a
compressing.
problem. Yeah, they had a
Exactly.
problem with it in the first. Yeah, so your foundational, make sure that your levels and stuff are good. Like
Yes,
when you're recording, they don't have everything like spiking into the red, and like, well, I'm just gonna put
exactly.
it down because you know, if you can make sure
Yes,
that you have good levels, even on the
yes,
demo, because the demo, like we said, could be the thing that you want to use.
yes. Why
So
not?
you don't want to have it where you gotta spend all this time cleaning it up,
Yes,
you didn't have
absolutely.
to do that. But the question as a Moog
Yes.
user myself is like, what do you like about your Moog? I always
The depth of the bass frequencies, the
yeah,
depth. It's um because I record. I play bass, and I pretty much I play all the instruments in my whatever what you hear, what you listen to in my music. It's pretty much all my work, but for the style of the type of music I produce, the Moog has the best bass lines that I can ever imagine. The depth, the
yeah, even to
fat
this day,
sound of the
it's
Moog.
still the
I
best.
mean, yeah, with the Moog, you know what I'm talking about. You can choose a sound in the Moog and make it like the predominant riff in your
Yeah,
song, and that's all you need.
yeah, that's the
I
thing is, like, I think that's interesting what I read is, because it takes up so much headroom, that
mm-hmm,
when the DX7 came, like, some engineers and producers liked the fact that it wasn't taking up so much, but
mm-hmm,
then they kinda lost some of the and I think why Moog has kinda come back into fashion is people realize that sometimes you do
yes.
want that thing to be that overpowering. You do want that organic analog really like this it's just fat. It's just fat and it feels like an organic instrument, even though it's not. Because like Bob used to have all these quotes that he felt like he was tapping into something that was
Yes.
organic, even though he built something that was mechanical. And it's just the
Yes.
way the oscillators are designed, the way it just feels like a organic instrument to me. Like when you play it, it just feels like it has a
Yes.
capability that you can just
Yes.
express yourself by just playing with the filters. Like when you're on a Moog, like when you're recording, you can actually just play with the cutoff, play with them as you're playing, and make something very point in time.
Absolutely. Yes.
And that kind of gives like this authentic stuff. They like, well, every take could be different because it depends on which take you want.
Yes. Yes. As a matter of fact, I try not to loop anything when I'm playing the Moog. I try to play the entire track because
Mhm.
every time I hit the key, it's like, as you say, it's a new sound. So I can play a riff, I can play a chord several times, and every time I hit the keys, even though it's the same chord, it will sound slightly
Yeah, little
different,
yeah, it's
and
because
that's
kinda
unique.
organic. Yeah, well, it's kinda like
Yes.
even within the Moog line, like, they might have been built on the same assembly, but they 2 different Moogs from the same, like, model
Yes.
can actually sound different. It's the same
Absolutely.
model,
Yes. That's why
and they can sound different,
each
and
model.
it depends
Yes.
on, like, if you
Yeah.
start playing it before it warms up or, like, after it warms up, and so, like, depending on,
Yep.
like, the temperature of your room, temperature outside, there's a lot
Yes.
of things, it's, like, a lot of it and then some people, they don't like that. They rather have like, "I wanna know I got a like a Roland Phantom or I got a one of the big uh, Korg M1 type of thing, or like any of
Yeah.
the things are more defined. Like I know I'm gonna get the same thing every
Yes.
time. But I've always been the kind
Yes.
of artist like I don't necessarily want the same thing. That's why I like Eurorack because I like to play with
Yes.
the variability.
Yeah. And you know what? It's actually something that all the instruments behave like that. Because what you're describing is what would happen to a violin. Every time I play the violin, depending on the weather conditions or the strings, the tension, even just the dust on the strings, or there are so many factors that play a role. So why complaining about a synthesizer where all the instruments, even
Yeah,
a
they're all
guitarist
gonna
could
sound
tell you,
different.
yeah, the wood might behave in a different way, the strings or your fingers today. So why do we don't have to limit ourselves to the predictable. Predictable is boring, right? So
Yeah, that's
uh
what I love about sound design. You know, 'cause we talked about being, and then the thing is like there's sound design, and then there's actually post production where you get to
mhm,
kind of shape. And, the kind of big example that people kind of know from experience is like, if you look at the Beatles and
mhm,
the fact that they used the studio as a canvas.
yes,
So George Martin was using the studio as a canvas to do more than what the Beatles could do on stage in Hamburg. They actually go and start using backward tape looping. And I read a story that somehow like he had been working on Peter Sellers comedy records that
oh,
had
okay,
backward loops, that had like effects, that had
mhm,
multi-tracks going on. And the Fab Four, they were fans of Peter Sellers, and they found out George had actually worked on those records. And then it's
mhm,
like, what if we take some of those techniques and use them? And it became
smart,
like to me the age of the album, where to get the Pink Floyds, you get the Yeses, you get the Genesis, where there's like you can use the studio as a canvas to create like these sound paintings where you can
yes,
layer sound like
mhm.
color, right? Is that the way you look at things like
Yes,
that?
yes, absolutely. And I go with the flow. I mean, I might start with an idea, with just an intro or a chorus or a verse, and then I let it develop as I'm working. I might go back. I might use part of a one intro in another song, or putting together two ideas, or split them into two different songs.
Yeah, yeah, Zappa
One of
technique.
my singles in my latest album, I wrote my first and most popular single, Rain, a night that I was upset because I couldn't finish one of the other songs. So I was like, okay, you know what, I feel like running away from all of this, just run away. And I started thinking, okay, run away, run away, run away, and then became the intro of my first and most popular single, Rain, on the album Dystopia. So sometimes even the frustration, even the fear of not making it, can become something productive. So,
Yeah, because
um,
you could be in the middle of trying to get something, and then it's like failing. And I've had many songs where I was doing a rehearsal for the song, and it just wasn't cutting it. Then I
mhm,
like out of frustration, I just went and did like a jam and kind of vented and kind of stream of consciousness starts spouting off lyrics. And then I listened to it, I was like, that's actually the
yeah,
song.
yeah,
It's like if they took this much effort in like 55 minutes of doing something that wasn't working in 5 minutes of doing something that worked.
yeah,
Well, it's
yeah,
it's
exactly.
it's still worth it, because I got to the last 5 minutes. It's like you can't look at it as like, oh, that's a waste of time. It's like it's not a waste of time, right? Because it got you there.
Yes, absolutely. I think I believe is it what happened to the Purple for with Smoke on the Water. Um,
Yeah,
I heard the story. They were in the rehearsal studio, and at some point they saw this fire started in the building across the street, and that's
yeah.
how Smoke on the Water was written. It was like, oh God, look, there is
Yeah,
smoke
just
coming
do something real
from the
time and like
water.
actually, yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting
So
when you can do that. Like Zappa had these famous pictures of him like in his his
mhm,
living room, listening to live tapes and
mhm,
studio tapes, and then he would kind of mix and match them, and then go back and like, oh, I'm going to turn this into a song. So he would
yeah,
take things from performances, things from studio work, and then kind of like, oh,
yes,
here's the idea, because like
yes,
you're using everything as a resource. Like everything
yes,
I'm doing is a resource, and then it kind of, today's
yeah,
world with the computers, that's easier. But like back then, he's kind of
yes,
doing, physically what we can do
yes.
now in a DAW.
Yes, true. Uh, one final advice for particularly independent music producers: uh, do not uh, mastering. mastering. So it's the final stage of the recording process of the mixing and recording process, which leads
Hmm.
to the mastering. Um, I highly discourage anybody to try to attempt mastering the final product
Themselves.
in your home studio, because unfortunately the outboards, the precision required to do a decent mastering of any type of music requires a lot of money, and a recording studio that is treated acoustically to perceive all the frequencies, all the very detailed mistakes that might be present in the final mix down. So don't go cheap when it's time to master your product, because unfortunately the mastering for $20 does not exist. I mean,
Mm.
it can be, there are people out there trying to scam musicians, offering a $20 mastering. Don't go for it. Just
Hmm.
understand that mastering, it's a different, I don't do it in my recording studio. I use an external recording studio to where I go and master all my tracks, because the mastering process is, it's when the product is put under the scrutiny for radio, for SoundCloud, for Spotify. So it's the last stage before you package the product for all type of streaming companies, for radio edit, whatever. So any mistake done in mastering cannot be undone,
Hmm.
versus anything you do during the mixing process can kind of be corrected. So make sure you always rely on a mastering engineers. They're different than recording engineers. Even I don't have the knowledge, the expertise as a mastering engineer. It's totally different.
With its own art.
And
Sounds like it's like there's different roles, and I
yes,
know a lot of people want to do it yourself, but sometimes like if that task really is going to like badly reflect on your work, then you probably want to put the time in and the money in to actually
oh
do it
yeah,
with
there is
a
actually a word for that. It's called a mastering in the box, mixing in the box. So when you rely on the limiter that you can find, the app that it's compressing you're just gonna mix in the box, and it's gonna sound like a homemade production, versus what you can achieve in a mastering studio. It becomes three-dimensional, becomes the product that you can
yeah,
listen to
gives it
after
the weight,
20 years, and it will still sound amazing.
gives you
So
that radio
that's
level
my,
quality that you
yes,
expect that you want your song to have. I want to
yes.
thank you very much for being a guest on the Family Like a Ghost podcast. It's been really cool to talk
Thank you,
to
Phantom.
a person that's so involved in music, and at the point in music where a lot of people probably need to understand, engineering and production. Uh, some of these things, like you've said, there's a lot of tools now that say you can just digitally do everything and just like pay some service and it would just do it for you. And it was like, oh, I would just do it that way. But like, yeah, there's still a reason to have a person who's professionally trained to actually do the work. So in this
Absolutely.
AI age, not the computer's not doing everything, at least not yet. You know,
No, computer cannot replace the human expertise, and will never, because
yeah,
the
I never
the the
think they
brain.
can. I've had
It,
people on the show to tell me that like AI is going to replace real musicians. I was like, well, who wants to listen to that? Like
uh,
I don't know who wants to listen. I mean, not that you couldn't do it, but I don't think
mhm.
like then music's going to become like totally like why would they listen to it?
AI will never replace the right brain, the creativity of a human brain. Let's give ourselves a little more credit, and
Yeah,
do
we need
not
more credit.
surrender to the machine.
Yeah, don't let the the tech bros sell you that because they want to sell you that. They want to sell you that you're like everything can be like all your art can be done by AI, all your music can be done by AI, all your film work can be done by AI. It's like,
Yeah,
and then it's not,
yeah,
it's gonna be kind of like fast food entertainment.
yeah. I will.
Not
I
very
like
satisfying.
to, leave your listeners with a one fundamental drop of wisdom. There is no AI that will replace the human soul.
Yeah,
That's
that's a good final word. I'll give you that. Thank you very much for being a guest on a family.
thank you for having me. It was such an honor and a privilege, and it was so fun.
Yeah, thank you. We tried to keep it kind of jazz
Thank you,
like.
Hannah.